Hey, this is Miles, and I just wanted to do an episode of the Extra Miles here. For those of you who are fans of Scon Biology, this is not a Scon Biology episode. I'm not saying don't watch it, but it's probably going to be pretty different from what you expect, so just be warned. I started doing these series before I actually started doing Scon Biology, just as a way for me to kind of riff on stuff with some of my friends. And so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to talk about some stuff that, has been on my mind. Scon Biology, hopefully get something up early this week. Got my wisdom teeth pulled yesterday, and I think I'm doing pretty well considering. But Scon Biology, I really kind of like to bring that extra level of care to the videos because, I really take a lot of pride in what I'm doing there, and I want my videos to reflect that. So until I'm a little more healthy, uh, just going to do some riffing here. So, kitty's in my lap. So, first thing I want to talk about is The Ultimate Fighter. The Season 15 premiere was last night, and it was on a new network. They moved The Ultimate Fighter from Spike to FX, and I think the entire actual Ultimate Fighting Championship, the sport aspect of it, is going from Spike to Fox Sports Network. So it seems like an attempt to bring the brand a little more mainstream, put it on more of a mainstream network. And so it was kind of interesting to see how this was reflected in the episode. Now, the big hook for this season is that the fights are all going to be live. So you tune in on Friday, you're going to see the episode, but when it comes to the actual fight, that's a live fight. And I guess the reason for doing this is, in previous seasons, the fights had been previously taped, and often you could kind of get a glance at the finale, who was going to be on the roster for the live finale, and you could kind of piece together, okay, well, this person's not on the card, they probably got cut. This person is on the card, but they're fighting someone I haven't heard of, so clearly they didn't, make it to the final match. And so I think by having it live, they're basically keeping it spoiler-free. So for the first episode, you had 32 fighters, 16 fights, 2.5 hour season premiere. Now, I say it's typical that they typically have fighters fight their way onto the show. Not every season of The Ultimate Fighter has held to this formula, but a lot of them have. And I've seen some where they've done basically the same number of fights and condensed it down to an hour. So, being live, it was pretty much not edited. And in order to get 16 fights in 2.5 hours, what they did was they did one round, one 5-minute round to decide things, which I think is kind of interesting and doesn't necessarily play to certain fighters' strong suit. For instance, I was a wrestler. I had a losing record. I'm not going to tell you I was a great wrestler because I was not a great wrestler. I was also a distance runner. So for me, if a wrestling match ever went the full 3 rounds, 9 out of 10 times I won that match because I had the endurance. I didn't have the explosive speed, and so if I got pinned, it was typically in the first 2 rounds, but if it went 3 rounds, it was almost always in my favor. So having him only do 1 round was kind of interesting. Maybe not the best for everyone who competed. Show felt a little odd being on FX. Makes me kind of curious to see how this whole live aspect is going to play out. I thought the coaches on the whole were pretty quiet the first, hour and a half. They really didn't hit their stride until, the last part of the program. The coaches, you got Elijah Faber, former welterweight, I think welterweight champion, Dominic Cruz, who was the current champion. So you had a title defense that Elijah lost, and Dominic took the title, and it's setting up for a rematch, which I think is cool. Obviously, I didn't watch as much WEC as I did UFC, and so I don't know these coaches all that much. But again, they were pretty quiet. It took them a while to really hit their stride and start, commentating on the matches. I thought that the new announcer guy, I guess ringside commentator, was kind of lacking in charisma. So, not to take digs at the guy, but hopefully that gets worked on this season because he just didn't have much presence. So I'm just kind of wondering why the live angle. I mean, in previous seasons, you had the live finale. You had that valve of, okay, you really don't know what's going to happen on the finale night. That is live. And so making the individual matches live, I'm just not sure, what that really accomplishes. It was kind of interesting to see what FX was doing with the program as a whole. They were clearly kind of playing it more towards the sports crowd. They took a lot of effort to kind of introduce new viewers to what this sport is all about. And I'll be kind of curious to see, do they really bring in a new viewer base being on a new network, or is it really just you're getting people like me who used to watch the show just migrating over because we still want to watch the show? It was also kind of interesting in that, maybe they classed it up a little bit because unlike Spike, there weren't as many cheesecake shots of the UFC ring girls, to the point where, save for like a shot at the very end, they weren't there at all. It'd be like going to a basketball game or a football game and there not being cheerleaders. It's just one of those things where you didn't really take note until the very end, and then it's like, oh, okay, I guess they're cutting back on that. And not that that's a bad thing. I mean, I watch for the sport, and so to see him kind of class it up a bit, play more towards this is a legitimate sport, that's something pretty cool. And obviously UFC has struggled throughout its history to be taken seriously as a sport. And so hopefully this is a move in the right direction. Hopefully brings in more people to view it as a legitimate sport. I really kind of got to watch this sport in its infancy, and to see the sport that was, considered human cockfighting in the beginning, brought before the Senate to clean up its act, to see what world-class promotion it's become, is really kind of interesting to watch. And I think Dana White, for as much as the guy can run his mouth, he's a pretty brilliant businessman, and he knows how to promote the sport. And I really look at some of the new champions as being great for the sport. I mean, George St. Pierre is a phenomenal athlete any way you look at it, and an incredible sportsman. I mean, this is your role model, John Jones, the new champion. I mean, to have someone that young with that much success, that's really exciting to watch. So I've seen this sport kind of clean up its act over the years, and, I'm pretty happy to see with where it's at right now. But talking more about the Ultimate Fighter, because that kind of exists separate from the UFC, from the actual sport part. Now, obviously, people from the Ultimate Fighter Tough can go on to have successful careers in the UFC, but it's something where I always was kind of captivated by the reality TV part of the show. And, maybe that's just me being dumb, but I really kind of liked how you could identify with certain fighters, who were the sportsmen, who were the bullies, who were the pranksters, and so you could really kind of look and see what type of person this guy was, and side with him or side against him, and it really kind of got you invested in, not only the drama of the house, but the drama of these two, going in to a fight. And so by switching to live, I wonder if they're going to be downplaying the reality aspect of that in favor of playing up the sport aspect. So, I'm kind of going to need another week to, well, a couple weeks to wait and see what they're doing with that. So I do like The Ultimate Fighter as a reality show. I think it's pretty much the only reality show I watch, and I really like the blending of sport with the reality aspect because it makes the fighters human. It makes some of them likable, some of them not, but it really helps get you invested. And then when you see them go on to great success, you can kind of nod and say, yeah, I remember that. I got to see their rise to the top. So that's my take on The Ultimate Fighter Season 15 premiere. Gonna shift gears here and talk Street Fighter Cross Tekken, because I guess I'm in the mood to talk fighting, and got my hands on my copy of Street Fighter Cross Tekken. So right out of the gate, just want to talk about the game. And I think the game is great. It just plays really, really well. It kind of finds a nice middle ground between, say, Street Fighter 4 and Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Street Fighter 4 is very straightforward in its systems, whereas Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, there's just so much going on, so much to keep track of. I kind of find myself aligning a little bit more with Street Fighter 4. That's a game I put a lot of my time in online, just because it is so straightforward. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, I really haven't put a lot of time in online, and that's because I just feel like I need a lot more offline practice to really wrap my mind around the whole thing before I can really go online and, put the time in. So by having 2 characters instead of 3, the tag mechanics, everything is just working really well. There's more to keep track of than in Street Fighter 4, but not as much as Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. So I think it brings together a certain accessibility. Now I'll probably still, months, years down the line, say Street Fighter 4 was the better game because of its accessibility, but Street Fighter Cross Tekken really is an accessible game and definitely an enjoyable game, which kind of brings me to talk peripherally about the game in kind of more negative ways. The game is good, but some of the things surrounding the game are not good and kind of bother me. I want to talk about those. First thing I want to talk about is the on-disc DLC. It was basically discovered that I think it's 10, maybe it's 12 characters, or full characters, are basically on the disc that you buy, but locked out. They'll be available later as DLC, where you're basically purchasing a code to unlock that part of the disc. And this is really kind of frustrating because you think you pay for the disc, you think you're getting all the content on that disc. So to have fully fleshed out content locked out for the sake of we want some more money gets kind of frustrating. Characters are the lifeblood of fighting games, and so to lock out, it's still a huge roster of 38 characters, but to lock out almost 20% of your content right out of the gate, it's not really fair to the fans. Angry Joe posted a really heated video about this, and I think I'll, kind of let him speak for it. But the question is, where, as fans, do you ultimately vote with your wallet? Do you not buy the game, to show I'm not going to participate in this kind of shenanigans? Do you just not buy the DLC to show, I'm not supporting your DLC as a practice? And he really didn't have a definitive thesis as to how a consumer should vote with their wallet. And to be honest, I don't either. I got the game off a Newegg on a promotion for 45 bucks as opposed to the regular 60. So it's already a discounted game for me, and definitely worth the 45 bucks. And because it was only 45 bucks, I can see myself buying some of that DLC. Like Elena, my main from Street Fighter 3, she's one of those locked out characters. And Christy from Tekken, the Capoeiristas, I did Capoeira, so these are characters I like to play as. Um, so I can see myself potentially buying those characters as DLC. It's just tough because, when you take it on yourself to vote with your wallet, and basically disapprove of their business practice by not purchasing, it kind of hurts you a lot more than it hurts the company. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's all about numbers. If I personally don't buy the game, Capcom really is hardly going to notice it because I'm one guy. If you can get the numbers behind a sort of consumer boycott, fantastic. But for a guy like me to say I'm not going to buy this game, that kind of stinks for me because clearly this is a game I really like, and by saying I'm not going to buy it, it also means I'm not going to enjoy it. So it's kind of a complicated issue. I really don't like how bad Capcom is with DLC. I mean, let's be clear here. The jump from Street Fighter 4, the Vanilla Edition, to Super Street Fighter 4, I think it was 18 months from one release to the next. It might have been a full 2 years. They added so much content, stages, characters, adding multiple ultras for each character, that it just fleshed out the experience so much to where you could almost view Street Fighter 4, Super Street Fighter 4 was the game they wanted to make from the get-go, and my decision to buy Super Street Fighter 4 was definitely a good one. I really felt like, having both purchased the original and Super, I got a hell of a lot of bang for my buck because I enjoyed the hell out of Super Street Fighter 4. It may be my favorite game of this entire console generation. But I can see people being pissed off, if you bought Vanilla Marvel vs. Capcom, to see it rendered obsolete within a calendar year with the release of Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 as a disc-only version. You couldn't buy the DLC to upgrade your own old version, and when the player base swings over to Ultimate, you're left with fewer people to compete with, and that sucks that they would render their own game obsolete within the calendar year, no less. So, and then this, on-disc DLC, and if it were one or two characters, like I think they did with Soul Calibur, Yoda, Darth Vader, respectively, I could see being a little less pissed off, but a significant portion of content was locked here, and it really just feels like we're not being given a lot of respect as fans, and that sucks because the game is awesome, but the business practices behind it aren't. Shoot, there was probably something else I was going to say here. I'm going to stall for a couple seconds, see if it comes to mind. No. So moving on. Still talking Street Fighter Cross Tekken. This is even worse than the DLC. You may be aware of the promotion Cross Assault, which is basically a reality series designed to promote Street Fighter Cross Tekken, wherein 5 Street Fighter experts compete against 5 Tekken experts for $25,000 grand prize. It's basically a web-produced reality show. To speak of the show itself, it's pretty awful. Just the production is gaudy. The way the borders are. You got the little picture of the contestants, and then you got the stream of their fights, and I don't know. it's just not my cup of tea. I'm not saying my show's produced any better, because I'm just one guy with a webcam, but, you know, I can watch Evo footage, I can't watch this. But that's not really the issue here. The issue was the harassment of a player by the name of Super Yan, who is a female player, by the male coach, Eris Bactanians. There's been quite a few articles on this. She basically left, you know, forfeited her spot in the competition due to sexual harassment from Eris. And there's a lot of articles and videos out there. You know, so if you want to educate yourself on what happened, I kind of found out about it through Movie Bob. His basic thesis was, well, I guess I should put it in a little more context. Eris was asked, you know, basically point blank, can't we have our Street Fighter without the sexual harassment? And his response was basically, no, this is part of the fighting game community. And if you take the harassment out of it, it ceases to be the fighting game community. It becomes something else, like the StarCraft community, kind of taking a dig at, you know, another community. The argument that harassment is critical to the fighting game community, I don't buy into. I mean, I'm a member of that community. I'm not a very good member. You know, my win-loss ratio isn't anything to brag about here. But, you know, it's my major online gaming fix, is to basically play quarters matches of the classics, you know, updated. You know, to see Street Fighter 4 in all its incarnations and feel the lifeblood of Street Fighter 2 after so many years, it feels great. But when I play, I try not to be harassing. Like, you know, I don't use a mic, because if I get caught with, you know, your typical Shoto spam, Shoryuken, Hadouken, if I'm just not playing well, you're going to hear me say shit or worse. And, you know, I don't know how old the player on the other end of the connection is, and, you know, they don't need to be hearing that. So, you know, I don't engage with the mic. You know, one of those things, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. I'm not trying to direct, you know, anger at the player. It's just, shit, I shouldn't have got caught by that, such an obvious tactic. I kind of don't like Shoto spam. But again, you know, people on the other end of the line don't need to hear me saying those things. It does nothing. When I have a match, I try to jump out and send a player message of good game. Now, if it's obviously they're Shoto spamming and I'm not playing well, I probably won't send the good game message. But if I fight a higher level player and lose, but I can see the technical style or play style, I'll say, yeah, good game. I really like how you're playing. I wish I could play like you. If it was a close match, either way, I win or lose, good game. Close matches are the most fun. If it's something where, you know, I beat a player of lower rank, I tend to say good game and try and pick out something like, hey, good job catching me with that super at the end of round 1. You know, build them up so that they feel welcome in this community. But kind of getting back to cross assault here, that's my take. You know, because Movie Bob's ultimate thesis was, you know, any community that would tolerate sexual harassment is not a good community. It's a community that needs to change, that needs to eliminate sexual harassment. And I mean, that's something that I do agree with him on. But, you know, I kind of had to form my own context of what happened. Now, I clearly think that Super Yan was sexually harassed. I don't want to people to think that I'm blaming the victim here, because she was clearly a victim here. What was said was not right, and I don't want people to think I'm blaming the victim. I basically watched, a recap of, the events that took place, like a 15-minute edit job to put into context, what was happening. And to be honest, it's like a 15-minute video. I really didn't get offended until, about 2 minutes in. And so maybe that's something where my skin is a little too thick. Maybe probably should have been offended right out of the gate. Just to kind of give you some of that context, it's basically starts out with jokes about the contestants' bra size, to which she's laughing, they're laughing. She says she's not going to reveal that, but Eris guesses it right off the bat, and she makes a comment of, basically something to the effect of, wow, that's uncanny, a bit creepy. But, in that video, at least that far in, it seems like people are laughing and joking around, and that it's understood that this is, just kind of joking. It's not intended to be mean. But as the video progresses, it clearly gets that way. You can see the contestant become alienated. That laughter, she's not laughing as much. She's clearly not enjoying the situation, and it gets just worse and worse. Jokes about following her into a bathroom, putting a camera under the table so they can look up her skirt, buying her a skirt so they can do this, going through her phone, talking to her boyfriend. I mean, it gets damn creepy, So I watched the whole 15 minutes, 2 minutes in, I didn't think it was all that bad. By the end of it, I mean, just disgusting, And so what message can you take from all this? I agree with Movie Bob's thesis that, any community that would promote harassment needs to be stamped out. I guess I'm a little saddened to see that I didn't call harassment, right off the bat. I mean, it took watching the whole thing, to basically say, okay, this is not okay. I think the failing here is that an intelligent conversation could have taken place and didn't. No one stepped up and said, this is not okay. Eris clearly had a bunch of chances to do that mental check. Should I be saying this? Maybe this is offensive. Maybe I should shut my mouth. From what I've seen, Superyan could have done something to say, please stop. That this a little more serious. Of brushing it off with a giggle of stop. Just take a more serious tone of please stop. This is crossing a line. That basically none of her teammates came to her aid is pretty appalling in and of itself. That the producers didn't do anything to stop this, that Capcom didn't do anything to stop this is really unfortunate, because this was a real chance to show some growth for the community, to identify that there is a line, that this line has been crossed, and to basically put it out there that this is not okay. Let's take a step back. Let's deal with this, as individuals, as people, and as professionals, and move on from this. Let's not make this part of our culture. Let's dialogue about this and, maybe grow from this. And that, this didn't happen on Cross Assault is the real unfortunate end of things. That Superyan basically had to forfeit because she was harassed is truly unfortunate. That things had to progress this far, or that things had to progress at all. really. So, I guess the only silver lining out of any of this is, it's brought this to people's attention. And even though an intelligent discussion didn't happen at that time, that they had to alienate a competitor to the point where she left, hopefully this brings the issue to light here so that, the fighting game community and the gaming community in general can have, a truly honest discussion and, move forward to progress, to evolve as a community. I've seen some very well-written articles about this very incident, that gives me hope that, yeah, we can move on. And then you look at some of the forum posts, and you just shake your head because, there are intelligent viewpoints out there, and there's a lot of dumb ones too. So, the idea that the fighting community is mired in this tradition of harassment, and if you change it, it's not going to be the same, I gotta call bullshit. Because you can draw parallels to the UFC. The UFC was asked to clean up its act, no more groin strikes, no more hair pulling, stuff like that. And people fought it, saying this is going to change the sport. It's no longer going to be UFC. But through those changes, it has legitimized the sport. It's not a mindless blood sport anymore. You have people like George St. Pierre, again, an incredible sportsman. This is a legitimate promotion now. It has grown, as a community. And the idea that the Street Fighter community can't learn a lesson from the Ultimate Fighting Championship, I think it's just bogus. We have to take it on ourselves to grow as a community. Man, I've really rambled on long here. Just one final point, going back to the DLC thing, because I finally did remember it. I guess it's tough for members of the fighting game community with regards to DLC, because you're not given a chance to preview the DLC. Fighting games, the character roster is really the lifeblood of the game itself. And by having a character that I can only access by giving you, $5, it feels like, not the best use of money, because ultimately, when it comes down to fighting games, you pick your mains. These are the characters you use. You may dabble with the others, but these are the characters you enjoy playing, you do most of your winning with. And so, why would I spend money on a character that I might not like? I might not like how they play their moveset, and then I've spent, money for content that I don't find as enjoyable as the content already available to me. So the lack of ability to preview various fighters is a real downside, because now I can't really be an informed consumer. I want to try playing as Elena, operating under the assumption that she plays similar to how she did in Third Strike, but there's really, no accurate way of knowing until I actually try the character out myself. I mean, I can watch gameplay videos and say, okay, it looks like she has a lot of similar moves to what she had in Third Strike, so clearly the gap won't be that big. But who knows? Maybe if I buy it, I'm going to get burned. I'm going to find that I don't enjoy playing this character. And so that's a problem with DLC in fighting games, especially character DLC, is how do you avoid getting burned? I mean, there's pretty much no chance to preview this content, save for going to a friend who already paid for the content and trying it out yourself. And I guess, how do you justify the cost? How do I justify the cost of DLC? Of updating from Street Fighter 4 to Super Street Fighter 4, how do you justify spending that much money on fighting games? And I guess it all kind of comes down to, you know, whereas it feels like first-person shooters have kind of always existed in, say, the PC domain. These were games to be played on the home computer. I think fighting games, you know, having been largely an arcade phenomenon, it's easy to look at it as, you know, I'm spending $60 as opposed to thousands of dollars on a genuine arcade cabinet. And you get yourself a decent stick, you get yourself good speakers, a good TV, and you can have an experience that, man, can even rival the arcades, can even be better in some regards. So it's easy to look at it as, well, if I'm not shelling out thousands of dollars for a legit arcade cabinet, I'm only getting the game for $60, some cases $40 at a discount price. I can probably drop a couple bucks on DLC. That's really kind of my copping out to people outside the fighting game community who look at this and say, how can you support a practice like that? Well, if you're getting an awesome arcade game at a fraction of the arcade cost, you know, you can pay a couple bucks to unlock a little more. I'm not saying the practices of on-disc DLC aren't deplorable. I'm just saying that maybe this is how, as a community, we rationalize it. And I've gone on for way, way too long here. So I'm going to sign off. Hope you guys like it.